My daughter didn't cry when I leave. Her husband sat across the table chewing like he didn't just call me an extra mouth to feed. I had nowhere to go, no plan, just 2 suitcases and a heart that felt like it was breaking in slow motion. 3 months later, I bought the building they live in and tripled their rent. You probably think this is a revenge story. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's about a woman who stopped apologizing for existing. But before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If my voice reaches you today, and if you believe stories like mine matter, please hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. My name is Evelyn Gracewood, and I used to think being quiet made me safe. I was wrong. The day we buried my husband, the wind didn't howl and the sky didn't cry. It was quiet, almost polite, like the world didn't even notice he was gone. The chapel was half empty, the eulogy rushed, and people left quickly, murmuring generic condolences and glancing at their watches. And I just stood there clutching the photo of us from 1983, wondering how a life so full could end so quietly. I sold our home in Plano 2 weeks later, the place we built brick by brick when we had nothing but each other. I couldn't bear to walk past the kitchen where he used to hum while making coffee, or sit in the living room where his slippers still rested by the fireplace. Every corner whispered his absence. So I sold it, boxed up my life into 2 suitcases, and took up my daughter's offer. Maddie had said, "Just come stay with us for a while, Mom. We'll figure things out." She lived in Fort Worth with her husband Zephyr in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't ideal, but she sounded genuine. I needed warmth, familiarity, anything to steady me. At first I made myself small. I kept to the guest room in the back. I cooked dinner, vacuumed carpets, took the dog out when it was raining, refilled the Keurig pods before anyone noticed they were empty. I didn't ask for much, just a corner of belonging. Zephyr barely looked at me. When he did, it was through me. He'd grunt responses, leave his shoes in the walkway like he expected me to pick them up, and one night when I asked if he wanted extra gravy, I heard him mutter "freeloader" under his breath. I froze, but I smiled anyway. That's what you do when your heart cracks in a stranger's kitchen. I tried to talk to Maddie, told her maybe I was overstaying. She squeezed my arm gently and said, "He's just stressed, Mom. The startup's been rough. Don't take it personally." I didn't. I swallowed every awkward silence, every eye roll, every click of the remote when I was mid-show. I told myself this was temporary, that all I needed was time to gather myself, time to figure out where to go, how to start over. Then came that night. I remember because I had spent the whole afternoon making Zephyr's favorite chicken stew with dumplings just like his mother used to make. The air smelled of thyme and slow-cooked onions. I set the table, even folded napkins. Maddie was scrolling through her phone. Zephyr cracked open a beer and didn't say a word. Halfway through the meal, he looked up and said, "You know, this whole arrangement, it's not really working." I stopped chewing. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair. "We're not a charity. We have bills goals. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." The silence after that was loud. Maddie looked down at her plate. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she just murmured, "Maybe it's time to find something more." Stable mom, for everyone's sake. I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I simply stood up, walked to my room, and zipped up the 2 suitcases I had arrived with. I didn't slam the door. I didn't ask for one more night. I just left. When the elevator doors closed, I watched my reflection in the mirrored panel. Tired eyes, wrinkled coat. No one chased after me. No one even opened the door. That's the thing about being unwanted. You stop expecting the apology. I stepped into the cold air of Fort Worth with nothing but a phone on 14% battery and a bank account that didn't look like it used to. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. The motel I found was the kind you don't look up on Yelp. It sat off the highway in Arlington, squeezed between an abandoned gas station and a pawn shop. The wallpaper peeled like sunburned skin. The vending machine didn't work unless you kicked it first, but it was cheap and they didn't ask questions. I checked in under my full name. It felt oddly defiant. Evelyn Gracewood. The woman who once hosted Thanksgiving for 16 people now slept next to a broken heater and woke up to roaches skittering across the nightstand. The first night I texted Maddie, "I understand, I love you." No reply. The second week I sent another, "Just wanted to let you know I'm okay." Nothing. I stopped after the fifth message. There's a special kind of grief in being ignored by someone you gave birth to. Days bled into weeks. I applied for jobs cashier at the grocery store front desk, at a dentist's office, even tried a diner off the freeway. They smiled politely and said they'd call. They never did. One manager pulled me aside and said, "Ma'am, you're overqualified." And honestly, this job's rough on the knees. I lived off what was left of the house sale. Canned soup, instant coffee, motel rent. Watching the decimal point shrink each week felt like drowning slowly, with numbers instead of water. Every night I walked past the parking lot and saw others like me. A woman who slept in her car with bags of clothes piled in the back seat, a man with sunken eyes who fed pigeons leftover crackers from his pocket. We nodded at each other without words, the way people do when shame becomes language. One night I couldn't sleep. The vending machine had eaten my last dollar bill and the heater had finally died. I dug through the box of keepsakes I'd brought, old photos, letters, trinkets that used to sit on the mantel. And at the bottom, wrapped in a faded handkerchief, was a leather journal. My mother's. Lillian Gracewood. I hadn't seen it in years. I didn't even remember packing it. But something about the worn edges and the faint scent of lavender made my hands tremble. I sat on the edge of the bed, flicked on the yellow motel lamp, and opened to the first page. It started simple. Notes about grocery lists, church picnics, neighbor gossip. Then came a line underlined twice. He came again today, said he wishes things were different, that he could be with me. But he has a name to protect. I read faster, more entries followed. Hidden meetings, envelopes of cash she didn't want to take but did because I needed shoes. The way he'd kiss her goodbye and promise one day I'll make it right. She never wrote his full name, just initials CT. But then I found it an entry from February. He told me he arranged everything. If something happens, Mr. Richter will know. He said our daughter deserves something, that she's not a mistake. I dropped the journal. My chest throbbed. I picked it up again. Richter. That name rang like a bell in a quiet church. I scrambled for my phone. Mr. Solomon Richter, estate lawyer, Houston, Texas. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat at the desk journal in my lap, fingers frozen. My mother had kept a secret all her life. And now sitting in a motel room with peeling walls and a dying bank account, I held the key to everything. Not a handout, not revenge, but truth. And truth, as I was about to learn, can change everything. I read through the journal like it was oxygen and I'd been underwater for months. My mother's handwriting, once familiar, now trembled with secrets I was never meant to know. Line after line painted a picture I'd never imagined. Evelyn will never know, she wrote. He promised he'd make sure she was taken care of. Solomon Richter will keep it all quiet. I pressed my fingers against the page. Evelyn. That was me. She had written about me like I was some fragile secret to be protected, hidden, covered in silence and sacrifice. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the length of the motel room while my neighbors argued through the paper-thin walls. I cried. I laughed in disbelief. I stared at the name again and again, Solomon Richter, and wondered how many years that name had lived in my mother's head like a locked door. Now it was in mine. The next morning, I waited until the front desk clerk had finished his coffee and slipped into the small business center off the lobby. I typed Solomon Richter, Houston attorney into the clunky motel computer. There he was, Former estate lawyer, now retired? No photo, just an outdated office address and a line that read, "Private legal advisor to high net worth clients." It felt like a thread finally dangling from a knot I had never been able to untie. I wrote a letter by hand, careful with each word. I told him who I was, who my mother was. I told him I wasn't looking for money, only clarity. I folded the page 3 times, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it to the address listed. I didn't expect anything. Maybe a returned envelope or silence. Silence was something I was used to. 2 weeks passed. I had stopped checking the mailbox. Then my phone rang a number I didn't recognize. A voice, raspy but composed, asked, "Is this Evelyn Gracewood?" I froze. He said his name was Solomon Richter. He had known my mother. He asked if I could come to Houston. The bus ride from Arlington to Houston was 6 hours long and thick with nerves. I kept the journal in my lap the entire way, afraid I'd somehow wake up and it would all be gone. I didn't tell anyone I was going. There was no one to tell. His office was nothing like I imagined. Tucked inside a converted townhouse off a quiet street, the walls lined with old legal books, windows half draped with velvet curtains. He met me at the door himself. Tall, older, dressed in a gray sweater and slacks. His eyes scanned my face with something between familiarity and apology. He didn't waste time. We sat in his office and he pulled a small envelope from a locked drawer. It was yellowed at the edges and sealed in wax. He wrote this before he passed, Richter said. Said it was for you once the time was right. Inside was a letter, long slanted, cursive, elegant, and direct. Cassius Thornwell, a name I had only known from headlines and oil rigs. He confessed to loving my mother, said she was the one person who ever saw him for more than his last name. He admitted I was his daughter. He said he couldn't risk public scandal, but he would not let me be left with nothing. He had placed assets in a private trust. Richter had been tasked with safeguarding them until I came forward. Then came the documents. A financial folder thicker than anything I'd ever seen. Account numbers, property deeds, shares. A small but diversified portfolio. The total value over $1 million. Quiet money. Untouched. Unclaimed. Meant for me. I sat there for a long time after Richter left the room, staring at the pages. I thought of the motel room, of the vending machine, of Zephyr and his extra mouth to feed remark, of Maddie's silence, of all the nights I went to sleep believing I was invisible. I had been discarded, forgotten, labeled a burden. But now I was something else entirely. And no one, not Zephyr, not Maddie, not even the world that turned its back on me, had any idea what I now held in my hands. When I returned to Dallas, I didn't head to Fort Worth. Not right away. I checked into a furnished apartment downtown. It was small but clean high up with a view of traffic and skyline. I bought myself a new coat. Nothing flashy, just something that fit well. I cut my hair. I read books on property law trust structures and how to build wealth quietly. I learned words I'd never used before: capital gains, equity leverage, silent partner. I wasn't trying to be rich. I was trying to be invisible, but this time in control of it. It was during one of those quiet nights scrolling through a public tax lien auction database that I saw the listing. An apartment building, Fort Worth, distressed asset, defaulted on multiple accounts. I nearly skipped past it until I saw the address. It was the building. The one Maddie and Zephyr lived in. The very place they had told me wasn't meant for extra mouths. My hands hovered above the mouse. I clicked. It was real. Photos confirmed it. Same cracked tile in the lobby. Same second-floor unit layout. I closed the laptop. Sat in silence. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something darker. I didn't tell anyone. Not that I had anyone to tell. I contacted Richter, told him what I found. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "We can make this happen." We formed a limited liability company, EG Holdings. It sounded like something big, something that belonged in a glass tower. The name was mine, but the trail wasn't. Everything was structured so that the buyer would remain anonymous. Just another investment firm picking up a building someone else let rot. I went to the auction, not in person, through a proxy. There were no reporters, no cameras, just bids, numbers, and silence. It wasn't even a competitive sale. The bank wanted to be rid of it, and I had the funds. 45 days later, the papers came through. I was now the legal owner of the building that once threw me out. No one knew. Not the tenants. Not Maddie. Not Zephyr. Especially not Zephyr. I walked through the building on a weekday afternoon dressed like a real estate agent. No one looked twice. I made notes about the elevator, the plumbing, the paint on the doors. The hallway still smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and detergent. I stood outside their unit. My old room was behind that wall, the one with the lumpy mattress and the single window that never quite closed all the way. I didn't knock. I went back downstairs, signed the renovation forms, and instructed my property manager to begin lease restructuring within the month. Rental prices were going up to meet the current market value. Some tenants would be eligible for assistance. Others, those who had violated lease terms or failed to renew, would face adjusted contracts, including Unit 2B, Zephyr's unit, Maddie's unit. Their rent would triple. I didn't smile when I signed the notice. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt still. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt entirely still. That night, I sat by the window of my new apartment in Dallas, holding the deed in my hand. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. That building had once told me I didn't belong. Now it bore my initials. I didn't touch anything myself. I wasn't here for drama or spectacle. I ran the building the way any professional would, with policies, timelines, and zero emotion. I hired a respected property management company out of Dallas. They had a good reputation and no idea who I really was. That's how I liked it. The first order of business was to bring the building back up to standard. That meant lease reviews, market assessments, maintenance evaluations. Then came the official notices. Every tenant received a letter explaining the updates, rent adjustments, renewal requirements, and upcoming improvements to the property. It was all clean and legal. Unit 2B, however, received a slightly different letter. Zephyr and Maddie's lease had long expired without renewal. They were month to month unprotected. Their rate hadn't changed in over 5 years. According to market value and deferred maintenance charges, their new rent tripled. No exceptions, no favors. I waited. The first sign came through the property manager. Zephyr had called angry belligerent, demanding to know how this was possible. "This is theft," he barked. "We've been here longer than anyone. Who the hell owns this place now?" The manager responded with rehearsed professionalism. "The lease terms are valid. Market conditions have shifted. All questions should be submitted in writing." Then came Maddie's email, short, polite. "We're a little confused about the rent increase. Could we please schedule a time to talk about it?" It was the first direct communication from her since the night she stood by while her husband told me to leave. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't write back. Zephyr escalated. He left a voicemail, barely holding back rage. "Let me speak to the real owner. Stop hiding behind your little firm. I know the law. You think we'll just roll over." I listened to it once, then deleted it. I instructed the manager to stick strictly to policy. No personal responses, no exceptions. Weeks passed. Repairs began around the building. The hallways were repainted. New security cameras installed. The front gate finally locked properly. Most tenants were happy, thankful even. But I kept watching quietly, from afar. One evening, I saw Maddie in the grocery store. She was in the refrigerated aisle holding 2 packs of shredded cheese. One store brand, one name brand. She hesitated, then put the more expensive one back. She looked thinner. Worn down, she didn't see me. I stepped back, hiding behind the end cap of crackers, heart pounding in a way I didn't understand. A few days later, I got a voicemail. Her voice was quiet, brittle. "Mom, if you still have this number, I don't know what's happening. Everything's falling apart. Zephyr, he's not himself. I hope you're okay. I really do. I sat with that message playing on loop, but I didn't answer. Instead, I signed off on a second phase of upgrades. New lighting in the stairwells, anti-slip tiles in the laundry room. The funds came directly from the building's revenue stream, from rent. From Zephyr's monthly payments now tripled. Every dollar spent made the building better, safer, more dignified. And every improvement came from the same pocket that once refused to share a dinner table with me. I wasn't taking revenge. I was setting standards and letting the consequences speak for themselves. Under professional management, the building changed quickly. The broken buzzers got replaced. The smell in the hallway vanished. The landscaping crew came twice a week. People started nodding to each other in the lobby. The tension that once sat heavy in the walls began to lift, except in one place. Unit 2B remained a problem. Zephyr continued to fight every notice dispute, every charge. He used different names in emails, sometimes posing as another tenant, sometimes threatening legal action. He filed maintenance requests for things that weren't broken, tried to bait the staff, but the team knew better. They documented everything. He grew more erratic, more desperate. I scheduled walkthroughs with the other tenants, face-to-face, scheduled, professional. They shared concerns, praised the changes, asked for a few things, an extra recycling bin, better mailboxes. I listened, nodded, made notes. No one questioned who I was. Just a well-dressed woman with a clipboard and calm voice. One day in the parking lot, I saw Maddie. She walked right past me. I wore a blazer, sunglasses, my hair swept up. She didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't know. I watched her walk toward the stairs, keys dangling, her shoulders slumped. Zephyr, meanwhile, grew suspicious. He tried to uncover who owned the building. He sent a fake legal inquiry to the management company, pretending to be a paralegal requesting disclosure. It didn't work. My attorney flagged it, drafted a cease and desist, and added his name to a file of potential harassment. Then one evening, a knock at my apartment door. I opened it. Maddie stood there soaked in rain, holding a brown paper bag with a sandwich and a plastic bottle of orange juice. Her eyes were rimmed red, her hair limp from the downpour. She didn't say hello, just looked at me, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was 10, and scraped her knee on the driveway. I stepped aside. She walked in. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask to stay. She sat at the edge of my couch, held the sandwich bag tight like a shield, and said, "I don't know how everything turned out like this. I don't know who I am anymore, but I miss you. And I'm sorry." I didn't speak. Not because I didn't care, but because something in her voice was real. She wasn't performing. She wasn't begging. She was just broken. And she was trying. That was new. I watched her for a long time, not as my daughter, not as the girl who once called me a burden with her silence, but as a woman trying to find something she'd lost long before I ever stepped into their apartment. Later that night, after she left, I found a letter in the drop box at the building office. No name, but I didn't need one. It read, "I know who you are. You won't hide forever. I'll expose you. I'll make you pay." I held the paper up to the light, the slanted handwriting, the sharp angles in the capital letters. I'd seen that signature before on Zephyr's old lease agreement. It was him. He was spiraling. He wasn't just angry anymore, he was afraid. And men like Zephyr, men who've built their pride on control, are never more dangerous than when they start to lose it. I wasn't scared, but I understood now I had to move faster, not just to protect what I'd built, but to protect myself. Because this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about power. And the people who never imagined I'd have any, I decided it was time. After months of hiding behind contracts and proxies, I asked the management team to organize a tenant meeting, a formal presentation in the building's community room, the purpose to walk residents through the next phase of renovations and to finally introduce the official representative of EG Holdings. I knew Zephyr would come. He needed someone to blame. That evening, I dressed carefully. Charcoal blazer, soft curls, minimal makeup. I looked nothing like the weary woman who once stood in that very building holding 2 suitcases and a crumbling heart. The room slowly filled. Folding chairs scraped tile floors. Neighbors murmured over complimentary coffee and printed agendas. I sat quietly in the back as the property manager opened the meeting outlining the upcoming upgrades, water filtration systems, soundproofing, insulation, digital security badges. The residents listened, engaged, even enthusiastic. Then the doors slammed open. Zephyr entered, dragging Maddie behind him like a storm cloud. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He marched down the center aisle and interrupted the manager mid-sentence. I want to know, he barked, who's really behind this rent-gouging circus? Who the hell's profiting from bleeding us dry? The manager turned, calmly looked toward me. I stood up, stepped forward, took a breath. My name is Evelyn Gracewood, I said. I am the current owner of this building. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the vending machine outside. Zephyr froze. Maddie turned to me, mouth slightly open, searching my face as if seeing it for the first time. Zephyr's voice broke the stillness. You're doing this to destroy us. This is revenge. I met his eyes without flinching. No, I said, quiet but clear. I don't need revenge. I let you carry your own consequences. That's all this is. Gasps rippled across the room. A few tenants exchanged whispers. Maddie stepped forward. Her voice shook but held. Stop, she said to Zephyr. You threw my mother out like trash. She asked for nothing, and now she stands here not begging, but building. You don't get to speak for me anymore. Zephyr looked at her stunned. For once, words didn't come easily. He turned, tried to push past me on his way out. His shoulder clipped mine. He leaned close, muttered through his teeth. This isn't over. I'll make sure of that. I didn't respond. After the meeting, several tenants came up to shake my hand. Some admitted they had guessed something was unusual about the new ownership, but none imagined it was me. A few apologized for not stepping in back then. I didn't hold it against them. We all learned to stay silent in different ways. I left the room not with victory, but with closure. Not loud, not triumphant, just still. The kind of still that follows the first deep breath after holding it for far too long. A few days after the meeting, I received an email from Zephyr. He had done his digging, or at least he thought he had. He'd uncovered something about the Thornwell estate enough to piece together an incomplete version of my story. He threatened to leak it to the press. Claimed he'd expose the illegitimate child of a dead tycoon who inherited stolen wealth through an affair covered up for decades. I forwarded the email to Richter. He wasn't shaken. We had anticipated this. Everything was documented. Cassius's letter, the trust, the legal paperwork, the statutes of limitation. Richter prepared a formal cease and desist. Attached to it were additional files, evidence of Zephyr impersonating a lawyer, unauthorized data requests, internal security footage showing tampered fixtures, and the anonymous letter he'd slipped into the office box. There was no doubt. Maddie called me the next day. Her voice was clearer than before. He's gone, she said. Packed a duffel bag, left in the middle of the night. I found a message he sent to a friend. He thinks you're hunting him, that you're destroying him on purpose. I didn't sigh. I didn't smile. I just said, no one's chasing him. He's running from himself. Weeks passed. Maddie moved out of the old apartment. She found a small studio near her job, started therapy, signed up for an evening art class. She dropped by my apartment one morning holding a wrapped canvas. I made this, she said. Inside was a painting, an abstract phoenix, all reds and golds and fire, rising. That same week, I finalized the sale of the building. An investment group made an offer too good to ignore. They'd seen the management reports, the occupancy stats, the renovation plans. I accepted, not because I needed the money, but because I was done with that chapter. Half of the proceeds went into a new foundation, the Lillian House, a safe space for single mothers in Fort Worth, a place for women like the one I used to be too old to be noticed, too quiet to be heard, too tired to ask for help. The rest went towards something quieter, a small house back in Plano, white fence, a front porch swing, morning sun through lace curtains, the kind of place I used to dream about when the world felt like it had forgotten me. On move-in day, Maddie helped unpack boxes. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to fill the silence with apology. That night, we sat side by side on the porch swing, watching the sky darken above the trees. I told her everything, about the journal, about Lillian, about Cassius, about the woman I used to be, the one who bent to be smaller, softer, easier to carry. She listened, then whispered, "You were never weak. People just wanted you to be." I looked at her, and you weren't cruel, you were just silent when you should have spoken. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing more. Later, I placed the journal back on the bookshelf, this time with a small note tucked inside, addressed to Maddie for whenever she might find it. You don't need someone else's love to prove your worth, just the truth, and the memory of who you really are. From the woman who once stood on a dark sidewalk with nothing but 2 suitcases, I became the one who owned the building that cast me out. But I didn't roar. I didn't raise my voice. I let silence lead. And now I no longer live just to survive. I live to leave something behind. And I started with my name.